As folks enter, welcome. My name is Will Torres. I'm one of the admission officers at the Stanford Graduate School of Business. I am so excited to be hosting this panel from Africa to Stanford. Our goal today is to talk about all of those things in that early stage of the process. How are you thinking about business school? What was the transition like? What were those first few weeks like? And how can we make sure that we're providing as much information to everybody out there on the different journeys that people take to Stanford, so that once they're here, you're able to thrive, eyes wide open, and really reach for those things that help you lead a life of meaning and a career of purpose. When you come to Stanford, you're going to be joining a global community. In this year's graduating class of 2021, Joshua, I see you. Congratulations on your impending graduation. We had 43% international students. So it really is a community of folks from all over the world. This class represented 66 countries, over 70 languages spoken. Some of the most exciting things too is what's happening. How do we support some of these voices and experiences so that people are really able to learn and engage across all of these different lived experiences? Clubs and organizations are definitely a huge part of that. For this crowd in particular, the Africa Business Club might be of interest, bringing together professional and personal and community, regardless of where in the world that you're thinking of going, and especially for those thinking about returning to the continent. There's also our Middle East North Africa Club, bringing together a lot of folks from the greater MENA region to celebrate many of those destinations, people, and cultures. There's an international committee in our student government, as well as a DEI council where folks are able to get involved, and a Bechtel International Center. So Bechtel International Center serves our greater Stanford University and our pretty big international community. So for everything from visa questions to internship opportunities, they are going to be a great resource to help direct you to all of the different needs that folks from international backgrounds might be looking for while they're at the GSB. So let's go ahead and get started and get to meet our panelists. So we'll go from left to right. You could tell us a little bit, share your name, where you're from, and a little bit about maybe one of your favorite classes while you're at the GSB. So Michelle, if we can get started with you, please.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Really nice to be here today. So my name is Michelle. I'm originally from Kenya, but I've been in the US for, oh, wow, almost 15 years, I think, at this point. So I first came here for undergrad. I went to Haverford College, and then I worked in New York in consulting and in banking before applying to business school. A class that I really enjoyed while I was at GSB, this one is going to be a bit cliche, but touchy-feely, I think, is definitely up there. It's more around, and I think the official name is interpersonal dynamics. And so it's really around how you impact others, how you provide feedback, and how you essentially make yourself more vulnerable so you can form deeper relationships. And it's something that I try to apply both in my personal life as well as my professional life. So that's been, I think, a class that's had a lasting impact for me.
Yeah, Michelle, was there like a aha moment or a particular learning that continues to sit with you today?
I think the easiest way to summarize my takeaways from that class is you have to be willing to open yourself up if you're going to form deeper relationships with people. And I think, especially coming from Kenya, I think in a lot of African countries, that's not necessarily how we're brought up, especially in terms of like how we share our emotions, how you interact with leaders, how you interact with older people. But especially when you think about the culture in the US, even the corporate culture, a lot of it is starting to move towards welcoming more of that vulnerability in the corporate workplace, in terms of building leadership skills and building relationships across the organization. So that's why I think about that class a lot.
Nice, thank you. Abiodun, you can go ahead and introduce yourself, please.
Hello, everyone. My name is Abiodun Buari. I'm from Nigeria, and then I actually had my undergrad years at the University of Ibadan in Ibadan, Oyo State, Nigeria. So after that, I did industrial engineering, and after that, I worked a bit in Lagos, all my career in Lagos, prior to Stanford, GSB, and I applied directly from Lagos, Nigeria. So I'd never been to the US prior to going to Stanford. So Stanford took me to the US for the very first time. It was a beautiful experience. And then at Stanford, I think one class I really found really interesting, is managing and growing enterprise. And also, scaling, I think somewhere around scaling high impact ventures in emerging markets. Those two classes were a bit really good for me. The first one, because we actually deal with real life cases, real life issues that you could, encounter during your, organizational, growing your organization, as you say. The other one talks about, it's more like startup garage, allows you to develop an idea and then use yourself and your classmates to actually develop the idea in class, and also go as far as testing your ideas in markets. So it was a bit. I worked on EdTech then because I had passion of trying to use technology to deliver quality education to less privileged, and also that for me was also another class I found really interesting. So that's it for me for now. Maybe Joshua can take it out.
Nice. Yeah, Joshua, take it away.
Thanks, Buhari. Yeah, hi everyone. Nice to meet you. I'm Joshua. Like Biodun, my undergrad was in Nigeria, but in the better school, Obafemi Awolowo University, not quite 45 minutes away. So I was a clinician and an academician in Kano. So I worked at the Kano Teaching Hospital and lectured at the Bayero University. And I had veered into public health earlier in search of broad impact, and then realized that I also wanted to focus on contributing to capital allocating decisions, because that would even allow me further impact, which is why I decided to apply for the MBA. So I applied again from Nigeria, from Kano, so not Lagos like Biodun. Classes that I've enjoyed at the GSB, where do I start? I know I'm forced to pick just one, and I've enjoyed many of the classes that Michelle and Biodun have spoken about. But I think one that stands out to me is OSM, so the optimization and simulation modeling. I've always loved numbers. I had to forget about those becoming a doctor. Not really, but I guess now I had to engage with it in a more germane manner. But I think what actually resonated with me was the fact that if you really think deeply about it, you can convert almost every qualitative problem to a quantitative issue. And that actually helps with decision making. And that has flowed into a course I'm taking now, corporate financial modeling with DiMazo, which I absolutely love because it brings the qualitative and the quantitative part of business together and makes it real for you. So I'd say that is a streak that I've enjoyed a lot here at Stanford.
Nice. And then you are thinking about going from the healthcare world to the finance world, correct?
Yes. Like I said, I had gone into public health, hoping to affect the socioeconomic determinants of disease, not just the symptoms of the diseases I was treating, but realized very quickly that everything needed to be paid for. And the current impact models we had, that is philanthropy or policy, or waiting for capital markets to efficiently distribute resources and be able to tackle things like climate change and co, I realized that it was just ineffective. So the fastest way to do that would be for somebody like me who had policy competencies, who had worked in government, who had worked in the nonprofit world, to actually be where capital allocation decisions were being made, and that literally means finance. So yes, I do hope to end up in development finance, stroke impact investing someday, and that's why I came for the MBA program.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm gonna stop sharing screen so we'll be able to focus on each other. And so folks, continue to submit questions. One of you, so Yusra, you are already beating me to the punch with my first question. And so I'm gonna ask it through the lens of our Q&A box here. Yusra says, thank you very much for the session. So thank y'all, our panelists, for joining us. For Abiodun, maybe we can start with you with this question. And then for our other panelists, I'll ask you follow-ups with slight adjustments. But how difficult was it to adapt to life in the US, especially in those first days, given that you just mentioned like this was the first time you came to the US?
At first, I came with the zeal of like, oh, if I could succeed in Nigeria, I think I can succeed anywhere in the world. I came with that mentality. But to be very honest, the very first few days were a bit challenging. I have to put it out there. Challenging because, there were language barrier, not in terms of the fact that maybe understanding of English, but more around the accents to which people around and even the professors were, were speaking. So I find it difficult to understand really deeply what, I find it difficult to flow in class a bit. So it was a bit challenging. Plus the fact that the volume of, materials I have to read to each classes, to each class is really voluminous compared to how we used to study back in Nigeria. So it was really challenging. But then I think what got you into Stanford in the first place is the fact that you have the ability to definitely, improve in no time. And with the support of the student, what do you call it now? The support, the student support service part of GSB were really helpful in the sense that we had to do focus groups, for example, where people speak, and then if I don't understand, I tell them to slow down a bit, and then I get the message, and they were really helpful. Within that same quarter, I was able to definitely get, myself on track back, but the first few days were a bit challenging. One of accent, shock, I would say. And then the other one is like, the volume of work that you have to go through. And then also the fact that the lifestyle is a bit different. I was used to, for example, local foods coming from Nigeria, and then you have to go to Akbaku to go and be eating pizza and a burger and all that every day. So that was another like very huge difference I have to like try to adjust to. So those were like the experience. Those were the experiences that in the early days. But I think they pretty much set me up for success eventually. Yeah. Thank you.
So you mentioned some of the student support, and actually, Joshua, you are one of our peer mentors. Can you start us and tell us a little bit about that program? And then I'll come back to like what your transition felt like coming to the GSB.
Sure, I can do that. So I think the thinking behind the peer mentor program is that peer-to-peer support can be oftentimes highly effective when it comes to tackling sometimes common concerns, but sometimes even more esoteric ones. And somebody who has walked in the shoes that you are going to feel is maybe able to give you cogent ideas and advice on tackling some of these things. And so I was selected along with 11 other awesome people to be peer mentors for the 2020-21 session. And I personally interacted with, say, around 35 mentees, because we were 2 peer mentors per section, and then each section had 70 people. So I'd say we were able to develop a deep connection, sometimes deep friendships. I was able to help with advice concerning academics, concerning interaction with other classmates, with those in MBA 2 networks, career searches, and just generally be a resource whenever the incoming student wanted to tap on that resource. The program has been reformatted a little bit, but it still remains, and I think that the reformatting is going to position it for even greater experts. So that's actually a great resource for those coming from more different contexts to the GSB to be able to tap into and use it to acclimate.
Nice. And then Joshua, you had multiple other graduate experiences. How would you compare the GSB and business school to some of those experiences? So, because I know some folks in our attendees group might also be coming from other graduate programs.
That is such an interesting question. And for context, I completed the graduate program in medicine, so I completed the residency and then fellowships after that. I also started, don't know if I'm going to complete a PhD, that was somewhere in Netherlands, and then I have a master's in public health from the East Coast, the school that spells Stanford backwards. So, so yes, I do have quite a few graduate experiences. Some say too much school. How Stanford and the business school compares to it, I'd say very favorably. And maybe this is recency bias speaking, but if I could go along maybe some attributes, I'd say in terms of one, inclusivity. I think that Stanford does a wonderful job of being very intentional on how to create community within and even outside what you'd consider your normal bubble. Two, I think Stanford does a good job of accommodating different learning styles. Many of the other places I was in, it's either the way or the highway. But here, there's a huge focus on multidisciplinary learning. So are you using seminar style format? Are you using didactic? Do you prefer a visual learner? Are you a more verbal learner? I think Stanford does a very good job of that. Three, the sheer amount of resources here, I think, is unrivaled worldwide. And that might be on a per capita basis because there's a smaller class size, but I do think the choice of class size is also intentional to be able to ensure that you are almost buried in resources, and that's fantastic. And if you're coming from Africa like me and you don't really like cold, there's something to be said about the wonderful weather in California. Yeah, so I could go on and on, but this just gives you a sense of how I think Stanford compares to many of the other programs that I've been in. I think many people could learn from Stanford.
And then Michelle, you did your undergrad here in the US. How did your undergrad compare to a graduate program, knowing that you went to Haverford, a liberal arts college in Philadelphia on the East Coast? Can you talk a little bit about how those two experiences might compare and what things folks who might also be attending a small liberal arts school could expect coming to like a school like the GSB?
Yeah, so it's funny. I'm trying to think back, and it makes me feel like it was like decades ago at this point. But I think the biggest difference is, well, maybe let me start with the similarities. I think the similarities is Haverford was a pretty small school. So overall, the entire student body was something like 1,000 students. GSB, each class is about 400. So times 2, you're getting about 800. So the size of the communities are pretty similar. But I think what I would say the biggest differences is one, when you go into undergrad, you're just at a different point in your life, right? That's the first time maybe you've left your parents' home. And so it's a very foreign environment for a lot of people. I think even the people who are maybe based locally, it's like the first time you're really in a different environment from your home environment. And so I remember for me, because that was my first time coming to Kenya, it was very similar to Abiodun. I think that's when I had to deal with the issues around like accents and being heard and getting used to the class environment, how you how grading is done here, the relationships that you have with your professors. That's where I think I had my culture shock. And so as a result, I think when I went into business school, it didn't feel as much of a tough transition as I think undergrad did for me. I think the other difference that I would call out is because you're sort of in a different point in your life, right? When you get into business school, you have some work experience for a lot of people. You've worked, anywhere between 2 to 4 years. You've been out in the world. You've essentially earned your own money in some cases. And so your approach to both the academic and social environment in business school is very different. So business school is a lot more social. It's a lot more network focused. It's a lot more focused around how you're building longer term relationships with your classmates. Whereas I think undergrad is more academic in nature in terms of the focus. And so I think at the end of the day, what I enjoyed about both experiences is, because they're small, you do have that closeness that Joshua mentioned, right? The community, the inclusiveness. But because you're at different points in your life, what you get out of a business school environment is I think more longer term in terms of your network and your career than probably undergrad, just based on my experience.
Nice. And then, so this next question, maybe we can start with you as well, Michelle. So the question comes from Kashira, who has a question about the MBA experience. How did it change or impact your perception of how you view business in Africa? Earlier, you mentioned some of the different cultural elements and how you interact with others. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, Michelle? And then we'll open it up to the panel.
Yeah, so I would say one of the reasons I actually was really excited to go to Stanford once I got in is because I think Stanford is one of the few business schools in the US that is taking a very, let's call it mature partnership type of approach to how they think about African businesses. And I think we see this both in terms of the classes. So there's a lot of, just case studies that are focused on African countries. I remember my first strategy class was on Equity Bank, which is one of the biggest banks in Kenya. There's a lot of classes focused around how you navigate some of the tougher sort of regulatory environments that we tend to see in a lot of African countries as well. And then of course there's the Seed Network that is a program at Stanford that works directly to support building leadership and business skills with African companies. And they have a presence, I believe, in Ghana. They have a presence in Kenya, and they work with a cohort of companies every year. And so being able to tap into all of those resources during my business school experience for me was fantastic, because even though I hadn't necessarily spent a lot of time working on the continent, it gave me a sense for what that could look like, because I'm learning more about the ins and outs of strategy making within African countries, exploring these regulatory environments. And then with the Seed Network specifically, I had a chance to do an internship with a Nigerian company. So I was able to work with a Nigerian makeup company the summer between first and second year, which was just a fantastic experience, because one, you're kind of then in the heart of a business on the continent. You get to see the ins and outs, you get to see the challenges, and you get to learn from the most senior leaders in that company. And so before business school, the idea of, let's say, moving back home and engaging in business was in my mind. I think being able to then explore that fully within the business school experience in class, as well as on the ground within internships, made it a lot more real. So that as I think about long term, what could moving back home look like, I feel like I have a much better understanding now versus before, where it was, I think, a lot more theoretical.
Yeah, speaking of moving back home, we have someone who did it on the panel. So maybe Abiodun, can you tell us a little bit about did the GSB, how did that shape your view of kind of working back on the continent, and how does it continue to kind of impact your work today?
So I'll tell you this. So currently, I'm a special assistant to the Kaduna State Governor, His Excellency Governor Malam Ahmed El-Rufai, and I basically focus on economic matters. I feel JSB literally set me up for success in that aspect, to be honest. So while at JSB, I focused a lot more on the social innovation. I took a lot of the social innovation classes and I earned the certificate for public management and social innovation. So that set me up for that line of career. And after grad, I actually worked a bit in the US with a fintech company, and then even while working there, I was very open to, doing something that impacts like the continent directly. And I knew the opportunity was going to come, it was only a matter of time. So when it came, and then I just grabbed it and I moved back. And the governor actually also, assured me of, things are going to be fine. I'm going to be able to work on programs that can really see the impact. And a lot of that I've actually accomplished and even more, And what Stanford MBA is still doing right now for me in my career is that it's setting me apart from every other person around, to be honest. Like, I have a better, understanding of problems. I have better, better idea generation system, and I also, shown out like really quality work that have been talked about in every part of the governor's office. So pretty much kind of like it puts you in a position where you can actually go far, not only in business, but in other parts in other part of the areas that you might eventually choose to go through. For example, our classes our Beyond the Market class, for example, gives me an idea of what really is the role of government or non-market state actors in ensuring the success of businesses in a particular territory. So for me, for now, if I've related with a couple of businesses. So for example, we're just building this very huge mall in town, and then we have to really get investors like retail stores and all that. And I really have to work with them to ensure that they succeed. They actually set up, open, and succeed, because that's where you get the benefits. And a lot of how I was able to do that was from the class, like for example, Beyond the Market class that we did at Stanford. So really, it gives me the awareness that as a government, your role is not to stiffen business environment, but to enable them to grow and nourish them to become billion-dollar brands around. So it's been a really interesting experience working back home, and it has actually opened even a lot more doors, to be honest. So for example, I actually got admitted to the MPP program at Oxford, and then the state government is sponsoring my attending the Masters in Public Policy program at the University of Oxford, for example. So these are the things that you get benefits from, based on the fact that they know that you're capable, that they just want to set you up for success ongoing on that particular part. So it's been a great experience for me so far.
Nice. And Abiodun, you mentioned the certificate in public management. We have a question here from Grace about how does Stanford support folks who are looking to work in the nonprofit world? So I can share a couple of resources, and then we'll open it up to the panel for how they've seen people working in the nonprofit, social impact space kind of taking shape on campus. We do offer a loan forgiveness program for folks who are working in the nonprofit space. So that is a wonderful opportunity to really think about, how can I be a leader in any field that I'm interested in, especially that nonprofit space, and not have to worry too much about like, what does that debt burden look like? How am I going to pay it back? We need leaders in all fields, regardless of what potential incomes might be. Another really great resource is our Center for Social Innovation. And so they are a wonderful hub for different resources, programs, alumni networks that can really get you connected and even provide additional sources of funding, internship opportunities, and connections and networking to help accelerate your career in that front. And so we are dropping a couple of links in the chat as we speak about those resources. But for anyone on the group, can you talk a little bit more about like how you've seen folks interested in impact or kind of making that change in the world come to life on campus?
I can offer a couple of examples. So I think beyond what you talked about in terms of the Center of Social Innovation, I think for graduating MBA 2 students, they also have a chance to apply for a fellowship. I want to say it's the Aberco Fellowship. Maybe maybe it's the wrong one, so you might need to look at whether it's the right one. But there is a fellowship available for those that are interested in starting their own social innovation ventures, and it helps to fund, I think, a year of operations for the person to kind of explore the model, set it up. And so one of my classmates took advantage of that, set up a financial literacy and savings platform targeted at lower income individuals here in the US. And so he was able to get a lot of support from that program, from the Center of Social Innovation, to get this venture up and running for the last several years. So that's the other example I threw out there. And yeah, and if I'm calling it the wrong thing, please correct me, but I think that's what it's called.
And then Josh, I saw you hopped on as well.
Yeah, I guess I could jump in there. I was actually going to mention the Aberco Fellowship. So yes, you got the name correctly. I think currently there's also a Botha Chan Fellowship that supports social ventures. They're actually just a lot. So in terms of the curriculum that supports you to be able to think through what you actually want to do and refine both strategy, your mission, and then in terms of practical experiences to actually allow you test out some of your theories, in terms of connection to alumni who have gone before you in many of these pathways, you are definitely not going to be left alone with any of these ideas. I think Stanford's change lives, change organizations, change the world just comes to mind here. Like they live the talk. So if you're interested in social innovation, I actually do think this is the place to be.
And so we talk a lot about coming to the GSB, looking forward, what's coming next. I think something that is also really important that is very special to individuals is how do you maintain the connections and relationships with the people you had before coming to the GSB? So here is a question from Fetogo about how did you manage to stay in contact with your friends and family in your home countries, even with a significant time difference? Any tips, recommendations, reflections on how you were able to maintain those connections?
And maybe I'll start with mine because mine is more recent than the other panelists, and then they could jump on. I think like almost everything in life, when you want something, you just need to dedicate a little bit of effort and time to it. I will not lie, it is sometimes incredibly isolating, and especially in Africa where we have more of a communal culture, where I was used to just walking down the road, just knocking on my friend's door and kicking it in and saying, hey, I want to sit on your couch. Serve me, I don't want to cook. You feed me today, you know, just stuff like that. So this is a very different atmosphere, you know, we're more calendar driven here. And you actually have quite a lot of deliverables to do. So in terms of how I have kept in touch, by reckoning with the time difference and maybe setting apart an hour or two before bed when I can actually just call people that I want to speak to, or even scheduling those conversations beforehand. I had to embrace other social media means. I'm not a heavy social media user. In fact, I tend to want to detoxify from it regularly. But I've realized that some people are more accessible on Facebook. Some people are more accessible via Instagram and blah, blah, blah. And so I literally had to embrace it just so that I could, you know, keep in touch with my circles. And then sometimes just the basic text message. I think when absence makes the heart grow fonder, And I think even for you who is apart, people on the continent, your community will be thinking more of you because they think, hey, you are in a different place and so on. So anytime they just hear from you, it's just fantastic. So I'm curious to hear if Michelle and Abiodun tried other means of maintaining connections with their communities.
No, I think you hit on all of them. I will say I think things have just gotten so much easier with WhatsApp, and just being able to do WhatsApp calls in most cases, you know, as long as data is cheap and free in your home country. I think it's probably been a much easier way for me to stay in touch with my family nowadays versus, for example, like when I was in undergrad, when you had to buy like a scratch card and you know you get like $10 and it's gone in like 10 minutes. So I think the technology in terms of staying in touch has definitely improved. So everything that Joshua mentioned, I think it makes it that much easier. We just have to be intentional about finding the time to connect with your family and friends back home.
Well, I think I don't have to repeat all of what Joshua and Michelle have said. I think it's the same for me too, just that because most times, well, almost every time I'm homesick, I do go, I visited Nigeria like a couple of times during my program, just also to, you know, stay in touch. And then, you know, there are so many support, travel supports that you can get from school to actually do these trips. And then I think I was able to leverage one or two of them in terms of like getting subsidized tickets, flight ticket to Nigeria and all of that. So I did that. And there was a program that also took me. So I did I think it's the SEED program that also took me to Africa, and I used the opportunity also, you know, visit Nigeria. So you get all those opportunities to, in addition to, you know, staying in touch with your family via WhatsApp. Internet is free and everywhere at Stanford, so you don't have any problem to connecting to your family on the other end. I think, like Michelle has said, now things are getting really, data is becoming, internet data is becoming really cheap now, even on the other side, which is Africa here that we have. So the flow of communication should not be as much troubling as it used to be in the past.
And focusing on today's topic, from Africa to Stanford, we have a question here from Evie about what do you think were some of your contributions to the GS community? And if relevant, how does like elements of your African identity, how might that have contributed, or what are some of the perspectives? Any thoughts or experiences on times that you've seen kind of that side show up and contribute to kind of what was going on at the moment?
I think I can chip in on this. I know that there are a couple of classes where a lot of the cases that we're doing were pretty much like focusing on another region. And then a lot of the conclusions are very different from what's obtainable on the continent, for example. So you coming in as an African to chip into the class, say, hey, wow, this is brilliant, but it's a bit a different world entirely where I come from. And then getting them to know about this new experience that is not obtainable in most other part of the world is really, really, really fulfilling. And it also gets them to really be very interested in Africa, for example. If I can really recall, I think one of the classes we're doing had to do with social innovation financing. And then there was something that we were doing, the conversation was around financing social innovation in, I think it was India or something. But then the case was totally, if you put that in the context of Nigeria, for example, especially from my experience with working with the low income environment, it was a bit different, and I had to give that perspective. And it became a full-blown conversation in the class afterwards. So these are like ways to which you can actually like show your experience of being African in class. There are other ways to which you can do it. The Africa Business Club, for example, organizes the Africa Business Forum every year. And then you get to participate, use your network to invite really interesting speakers to the panels, and also the program, as keynote speakers for the forum itself. And then people from other continents. I had like a lot of my friends from every part of the world coming for the forum and actually gaining so much from the speakers that probably they would not have encountered if they even not for the ABF conference, for example. So at least those are the two ways I can think of right now. Maybe Joshua and Michelle can also chip in on that.
Yeah, one of my favorite tools in conversations like those case studies or stuff at work where I'm like, I have a different perspective is yes, and then jumping in that way. So Michelle, go ahead.
Yeah, I think Abiodun gave a lot of great examples of how you bring, your experiences, your network into the classroom, into the campus environment. I think the other way is essentially connecting people to your classmates or even your professors to people on the continent, depending on what they're working on. So let's say, for example, they're looking to do a case on a company on the continent in a specific sector. A lot of times they'll reach out to students either through the Africa Business Club or just generally to just say, hey, what companies should we be working with? Should we be partnering with? If people are looking for internships on the continent, that's another way that, depending on the country that they're interested in, you can also offer perspective, you can offer introductions. And then the last piece, I think this was probably more pre-COVID, but maybe we'll come back post-COVID, is all the GSTs. So these are the global trips, the global study trips that Abiodun, I guess you enjoyed one of those where you're so excited. But these are essentially trips that happen every semester that students organize, and as a group you decide which countries you want to expose your classmates to. So during I think my second year, a group of students organized a trip to I want to say Uganda and Rwanda. There's been trips to I want to say Kenya and South Africa. There's, I think, been interest in organizing trips in Nigeria. I don't know if it ever happened. Abiodun, please hold me, hold me accountable.
Yes, it did.
Oh, it finally did. Okay, that's amazing.
Yeah, it did.
Awesome. Yeah. So that's another great way, I think, as African students, where you're able to really showcase what business means on the continent, what leadership means on the continent to your classmates who otherwise would not have that exposure.
I guess there's not much to add. I can echo everything Biodun and Michelle have said, but to that I'll also add that there's a culture of small group dinners here at the GSB, and to the extent you like to cook, you could actually just invite people to get a taste of Africa from you, and you might also be willing to screen one or two movies you feel are very typical or depictive of your reality in Africa. And it's also, this was something that happened in my first year, and I think a lot of people took a lot of learnings away from that. So that's also something that you could add. So there are just many ways by which you can actually contribute to the GSB community as an African.
Now you're making me miss GSB so much right now. There's also the part, there's this international food day or something where you get to cook food from a different part of the world. I still remember my plantain that I fried. It's the best. Like, people were literally coming to me to do it again, So it's so much fun being an African at the GSB. You don't even have an idea at all. Like, now I'm missing GSB so bad. I think I should visit sometime soon.
Yeah. Oh, you better come back, and you're gonna make me some plantains, and I will. You gotta teach me because I love some good plantain.
Yeah. Don't worry. I got you on that.
Yes.
Actually, Abiodun, something you made me. You're totally right. I think it's a lot of fun being an African on the continent, and I think a lot of it is you're meeting so many people from all over the world, but you're meeting a lot of other Africans. And guys, we're so much fun. Whether it's like within the Africa Business Club events, whether it's just hanging out, whether it's just being able to just relax and talk in whatever accent without necessarily people wondering if they can hear you. There's, I think, a big enough community that's been built over time where you just have that sense of home and sense of comfort that, maybe on a day-to-day basis when you're in classes, when you're in other experiences, you don't necessarily have that. But I feel like at least when I was at GSB, the African community was pretty tight-knit, where you really felt like it was essentially your place to come and relax and just, kick it and just be comfortable with your fellow Africans. So
don't let us also forget to mention Center for Africa Studies, just in case you've seen so much of your GSB African brothers. You can actually go to the Center for Africa Studies, where you meet Africans that undergrad, mostly, and other postgrad, come together to have evening nights discussing everything about Africa. It's also like a really good resource where you can meet Africans in the larger Stanford community at in a particular place. They do programs, invite people from the continent to speak on different topics also.
And then Joshua, I see you jumped on here. There's a question I think can be really helpful as people are getting excited about the GSB and comparing, especially if they're educated on the continent. Like, how do you engage in some of these conversations in the classroom in a way that's productive and constructive?
Yeah, I was just going to type there that is actually what is expected. The GSB does not just argue for diversity and inclusion just as a catch phrase or as a buzzword, but because research shows that it actually leads to better decisions, some more creativity, all of that. And the whole essence of going for a diverse class is to ensure that there's a diversity of opinions when issues are being discussed. So as long as you are cognizant of the impact of your words on those listening to it, you are expected and invited to challenge any notions that you disagree with. It takes some learning, doing it differently from our rote learning system in Nigeria and I'd guess a lot of Africa. But after some time, you get the hang of it. We're all smart people. We got into Stanford after all. So it doesn't take a few weeks. You might need to refine and sometimes choose your battles, because sometimes you realize that the point you're trying to make has been made already, or you're literally just killing a dead horse with with more guns. But yeah, it's something that Stanford actually invites you to do.
I also like to mention this experience I had, so back in Nigeria, and I'm sure Disha can attest to this, you dare not probably talk back at your professor in class. All you probably do is, take note of all of these things, and then shifting from that perspective to where you actually scored for having really good conversation in class is also like another one I had to struggle with at the beginning. I forgot to mention that. In fact, I had to go and have one-on-one, sessions with the professors to say, okay, how do you do that and do it really well, So it's something you also have to have at the back of the mind if you are coming to GSB, that, hey, leave all of those, you can approach professors. We have professors who invest in student ideas. So it can go as far as that, So you're going into a culture where you must have really good conversation with your professors. I've had conversation in class where students literally, change professor's perspective on what he's teaching. And it was so smooth. Everybody was happy in the end. It was really very encouraging, for the classes. So you should be open enough, have the mind that you're going in to go and have really good conversations and form relationship and friendship with your professors, rather than having a hostile, relationship with them.
Thank you. Oftentimes those are like the small learning tips and experiences and expectations that don't always get conveyed. So that was, I think, going to be really helpful for folks, regardless of what schools they might end up at here. And so I am actually going to claim the honor of the last question. We are getting close on time. As you put yourself back in your shoes of being an applicant to business school, what advice would you give to your younger self, whether it is about the application or even about business school? Any advice that you would give your younger self? And Joshua, maybe we can start with you.
That is actually very interesting. So the way I thought about it, reading up all of the resources on business school, I decided that there are 4 categories of people coming to business school. 1, there are career switchers. 2, there are career optimizers. So people who don't need business school to go up in their careers, but business school sort of like adds a little salt and flavor. Think of maybe people in private equity who are going back to private equity. Then there are those who are defining their careers, so career definers, especially entrepreneurs who know they have the entrepreneurial drive but don't have a product yet, something like that. And then there are career advancers, those ones who advance their career. So maybe think of those who are in healthcare administration and want to become the CFO of some healthcare company. So I think I was a career switcher. So I was pivoting. And so my advice would probably apply best to those that are switching careers. And it is come with an open mind. You're almost going to be starting from scratch, and to a certain extent, you're even 2 years post business school, you're still going to be in business school, you're still going to be learning a lot about the new place. So basically, the mindset you had when you were in college, when you could absorb a lot more information, listen more rather than respond, find the best ways to absorb information and process it. I'd say that's the mindset you should come with. But with regards to the application process itself, I think the most important advice I'd give is to start early and fail forward and fail quickly. So the more you iterate, the more chances you have to get it correctly. But if you allow analysis to paralyze you, then suddenly you've wasted a year just thinking, oh, how can I, am I? And at the end of the day, you won't be able to get it done. As far as I'm concerned, if you're thinking about business school, then you should be applying to business school. So I guess that's my piece of advice. Hope it's helpful.
Michelle, if you could go next, please.
Yeah, I think I'll build on what Joshua said. And I think the most important first step that you have to take is actually apply. So I think it's really easy to get into your head and to have a lot of doubts and to think that the only people who get into GSB or any of these top schools are like super geniuses. And I don't think I'm a super genius. Maybe Joshua, Abiodun, you guys are super geniuses. But at the end of the day, like if you don't give yourself the shot, right? If you don't apply, you're essentially taking yourself out of the game before you've even been considered. So I think it's normal to have doubts. It's normal to think that some of these schools are out of our range and out of our reach, but you have to overcome that and just put in the application, put your best foot forward, and you might be surprised and you actually get in. So I think that's the first thing. The second thing, in terms of just the mindset of applying, I really like how Joshua put it. I like those different categories. I think I could see myself in one of them. But for me, the other important thing about business school is you have to think long term. So it's really easy to think about, is this experience going to help me get into this job after, right after business school, or is it going to help me start a company right after business school? Is it that straight linear path? And a lot of times in life, things are not linear, and so you have to think long term in terms of both the application, but also in terms of the choice of school that you want to attend, and the experience that you end up having there, in the sense of, and this goes back to what I mentioned in the beginning, a lot about business school is the relationships that you form and the network that you build. And that's really what's going to carry you for the rest of your career, regardless of which industry you end up in, regardless of whether you end up working for a corporate employer or starting your own company. I'm 5 years out of business school right now, and the number of times I've been able to tap into my alumni network, both from my class as well as other classes, to move and navigate different, across different companies, is more than I can count. So that's the other piece to keep in mind with business school is, think long term in terms of the value you want to get from it. It's not necessarily just that first job or first step out of business school is long term. If I think I want to move back to Africa, if I think I want to, go to Europe, if I think I want to start my own company, is this experience going to set me up for that? And if the answer is yes, then it's going to be worthwhile.
Thank you. And Abiodun, take us home.
Yes. Okay. So I think I don't have much to say. They said almost everything. But then there's another part of it is the buckets that Joshua created. You can actually do two at the same time, because I felt like I did two at the same time. So I switched career and also advanced. So it depends on what you want to take. But for me, I think one thing is I still find really very surprising about applying to Stanford, like, on what matters most to me, I literally just wrote out my life and my, like, what really, like, I could remember crying and writing my essays, So I would advise that you should do internal reflection. It should be from your heart. Like, I still can remember two people giving me feedback and say this essay would not get to Stanford. But because I was like, I hear, let it be from your heart. Let me try it. If it doesn't work, then fine. And then it worked. I only applied once and it worked. So for a lot of the process, try and, internalize a lot of these questions that you'll be asked and just write purely from your heart. You are unique. You're just one person in the class. So and for you to have been accepted, you're bringing in a very unique perspective into the class. So try and think inward. Don't say, because somebody said he wrote his essay in this version, that's how you must do it. No, that's not how it is. It's being your true self, bringing your true self into the application that matters. I think the other part is also, like you said, the alumni network is unbelievable. Like, even in Africa, for example, we have young and vibrant alumni really doing like really good things. And I'm sure if I start mentioning a lot of them, a lot of people will relate to them. Tayo Oviosu, CEO of Paga, is one. I'm sure everybody knows Paga. And if you're in Nigeria, you definitely know Paga. If you're in Ethiopia too, I think you should know Paga. Like, you have JR Kanu, that is CEO of Rich, and is doing really good stuff in financial analysis apps and all that. So there are a lot of them. Temi just built like one of the state art hospital in Lekki, Lagos, Evercare. I'm sure a lot of people will know Evercare in Lagos. She's also an alumna. So these people are there as a resource for you to explore, for sure. And I'm tying it to what Michelle said, whether you're thinking of going back to Africa, whether you're thinking of even starting your own company in Africa, they are there for you to use. I've reached out to them, especially on when I was trying to navigate a particular government work. Yeah, and I had to reach out to Tayo to say, I know you sat on this policy deliberation before. How did it go? And he was able to advise me, and I literally put all of that in the document and wowed everybody that actually listened to what I was saying. So these are the things you can get from the network. So I think I'll hand it with that.
Thank you so much to our panelists. I had the honor of having a great time. Thank you so much to all of our attendees, regardless of where in the world you are tuning in from. It was a wonderful opportunity to share time and space with you. We hope to see you over the course of the summer. We have a ton of different events focused on different topics related to your journey, your application, and your Stanford. So with that, have a wonderful evening, and I hope to see you all again soon. Take care.